Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today, did James Franklin take a shot at Notre Dame for not being in a conference a day before he is playing them in the college football playoff? So I am recording this Wednesday afternoon. The clip I'm going to show you is from Wednesday morning, a press conference for the Orange Bowl. And I know that the way that the algorithm works, that probably a lot of you aren't going to watch this clip until after the game is played. So I wanted to preface that before I get into everything here. But the content of this video is independent from the game. And this is us talking about just kind of a general big picture topic in college football. So during the press conference for the Orange Bowl, both coaches were asked, hey, how are you guys managing your teams differently now that you are basically playing 15, 16, 17 game seasons in this new college football world that's similar to the NFL as far as games played? James Franklin answered first. He talked about resting and having depth and, just kind of like regular blah, 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 stuff like that. And then he used the second part of his answer to talk about the state of college football now, to talk about conferences, conference games. And I don't think he meant to, and he says he didn't mean to or doesn't intend it to be this way, but it comes off this way. He kind of takes a little bit of a shot at Notre Dame for not being in a conference. So let's go ahead and play this video, and then we'll come back on the other side and talk about it.
Obviously you talk about just the differences between our two programs and conferences. I think it should be consistent across college football. I think, again, this is no knock at Coach or Notre Dame, but I think everybody should be in a conference. I think everybody should play a conference championship game, or no one should play a conference championship game. I think everybody should play the same number of conference games. I was a head coach in the SEC. I've been a head coach in the Big Ten. I was in the SEC when the whole conversation was whether to go to 8 or 9 conference games. All the coaches voted against going to 9 games. The commissioner agreed and kept it at 8. I think it was one of the better decisions as SEC made. The Big Ten went to 9 games. I was not a math major at East Stroudsburg. But just the numbers are going to make things more challenging if you're playing one more conference game. So I just think things need to be consistent across college football.
He goes on to say, after we cut off that clip there, he goes on to finish the rest of his answer talking about the need for a college football commissioner and someone to kind of be the head of the sport and to kind of, control the chaos or the cesspool that we currently are in with college football. So to the point there about, is this a shot at Notre Dame or not? Every single Notre Dame fan, it's like basically if you had a draft of like, hey, what is one way I could trigger a Notre Dame person, is say, hey, join a conference. So the fact that he said there, like, hey, I think everyone should be in a conference, he's talking about Notre Dame. He's not talking about UMass, or he's not talking about UConn, or I think those are the only independents as far as I know. He's talking about, hey, everyone needs to be in a conference and everyone needs to be playing the same amount of a conference games. And, he goes on afterwards and talks about the idea of a college football commissioner. And this is type of the thing that James Franklin's getting at here, is he's kind of trying to describe like the world of college football that some people are forecasting we may have in the future, and that we need like some sort of figurehead of college football. We need a Roger Goodell. We need an Adam Silver. We need someone that is going to control the transfer portal. We need someone that's going to control NIL. We need someone that's going to control, the salaries that teams can pay individual players. And he's right about a lot of that stuff. But here is where he is wrong, is we are decades and decades and decades and decades, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's not like, maybe I made it seem like 50 years away from that. Maybe we're 20 years away from that. But for us to get into that kind of college football utopia that he is talking about, we would need people at the top to seize power. We would need the Big Ten and the SEC, basically. They would need to get together, and they would basically have to say, hey, we're going to start our own super league. We're going to cut out, all of the teams that we deem undesirable, and we're going to throw them in the trash. and we are going to basically have like a super mega jerk off conference, which we might be headed to that for someday, but I don't think we're going to do that because I think these teams at the top love, killing them softly, the people below them. They like having them bleed out slowly, and they aren't just going to like go out and snap the neck. That's my prediction. And also too, when the TV contracts come up, in the next, I know the Big Tens runs through the 2020s. I think it gets renewed in 2030. And I think the SEC is longer. But what happens too if like the Big Ten has their TV contract and, Fox or whoever deems that they're like, hey, we're going to outpay the SEC. Well, why would the Big Ten at that point, cede all things to go and team up with the SEC if they can make more money without them, and vice versa? As far as it goes to Notre Dame here, Notre Dame benefits tremendously with being an independent. They're like one of only a handful of schools that can be an independent school and be successful being an independent school. It's why they've been doing it for so long. Even though if you look up like the money, they don't actually make more than Big Ten teams. They make less, but they still make enough money that dwarfs all the other ACC schools and all of the Big 12 schools and everyone else basically other than the Big Ten and the SEC. But the Big Ten SEC, it's not like catastrophic how much more money that they make. So Notre Dame in their current situation, they actually probably would make more money if they did join a conference, but they like being independent. And Marcus Freeman talked about this earlier in the press conference where he was talking about, hey, because he was asked about being an independent school and kind of how that affects like their season and, affects how they like prepare for the playoff and whatnot. He's basically, hey, I view it as a pro. I use it as a recruiting pitch because we get to play in LA, we get to play in New York, we get to play coast to coast, we get to have different schedules every year. We get to play teams from the Big Ten, we get to play teams from the SEC, we get to play teams from the ACC, we get to play everyone all around the country. And Notre Dame also too, another huge reason that even though they don't get in the current format, they don't get a bye. Another huge reason, and I didn't realize this until I read this today. You guys will love this stat. Notre Dame fans will especially love the stat. Everyone else, it might make them sick. So this is something I read today about Notre Dame and as far as them making the college football playoff. According to Front Office Sports, with Notre Dame reaching the college football playoff, the university itself will bring home $14 million. So what does that mean? That means every team that makes the college football playoff gets $14 million. They get cut a $14 million check. The difference is with Notre Dame, as you guys can read here, Penn State and Ohio State will each bring home $2.2 million for the university, while the remaining part of the $14 million will go to the rest of the Big Ten, and Texas will earn $3.75 million, with the rest of that $14 million going to the SEC. So Notre Dame, even though they don't get a bye in the playoff, they get to make the playoff, and they basically, with the new way that universities get to pay players directly, and that's like a $20 million cap, they basically, if they make the playoff every single year, they get that for like 70% of that spending money to pay their players, basically, if that's how they choose they want to allocate. And I don't know if Notre Dame was going to have a problem reaching that $20 million threshold that other schools around the country will, but that's an added bonus for Notre Dame. So yeah, they get less money from the TV contracts, which again, not much less, but it's still less. And at this point, they're not going to go into a conference unless they're absolutely forced to. And it gets to a situation where they say, hey, you can be Notre Dame, we want you. We think you're additive. And we are basically going to cut off. We're leaving the NCAA and we're cutting off everything else. And I think we're probably a few decades away from that. And there's also a chance we may never get there because college football and college sports in general is a cesspool. And everyone running the sport is like, government, help us. Congress, help us. And Congress is like, that's why you have like Nick Saban going and just virtue signaling, being like, the transfer portal sucks now. And it's like, hey, Congress even though Congress is really incompetent on a lot of things, they also have a lot of other better things to do than to set up like antitrust laws for college athletes and schools. So the college schools are going to have to figure out their own stuff because they got themselves into this situation with the way the system has been set up for a long time. Notre Dame fans, I understand why you take that as a shot. Maybe you guys win, maybe you lose. Leave a comment of the final score when you watch this, or even if you watch this beforehand, leave a prediction. Good luck to both teams. Wish you well. It's going to do it for this video here today. If you liked it, hit subscribe, hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Subscribing is the number one thing you can do to help support this show. It costs you absolutely $0, and it helps you get recommended this video more, and this video will get recommended, and more videos that I post will get recommended to more people. So if you do that, I'll love you forever. Feel free to check out other content that we post here on the Sports Detective Podcast channel page, and thank you for watching. I'll talk to you next time.